Welcome to the Revision Wizards podcast. I'm Miss Catherine M.H, and I am joined by my fellow wizard and co-host, V.E. Griffith. This is episode 23, and this time we're joined by my alpha reader, Ben Godfrey, and we're here to discuss what both authors and readers should consider and expect with an alpha reader relationship. This episode is sponsored by our amazing patrons who help us to build our podcast so we can help make your editing and revision process so much better.
Our patrons help us pay for transcripts for our shows that are available on our website and for better audio recording quality so listening is a little easier on your ears. If you'd be willing to support the show financially for as little as $1 an episode, we have a bunch of neat benefits you can take advantage of, including a special podcast feed with extra content and personal updates, inside access as we collaborate on Avella, the opportunity to ask questions, professional editing, and more. You can find everything you need to know at patreon.com/revisionwizards. And with that, here we go with Ben. So, new guest today, if you would please tell us your name and your pronouns.
I'm Ben, he, him.
Okay. All right, so we're here to talk about today about being and using an alpha reader. Can you tell us how you guys met and how you got involved in alpha reading for Miss Catherine?
We actually met outside of reading, probably not uncommon. But she made a post one time just looking for alpha readers. She had just kind of finished up the bulk of her first novel and clarion call through social media and thought, hey, that'd be neat and cool and a good way to, get closer with a friend, do something that would help them out. So I shot a message that I'd be willing to do it. And it's definitely taken off. We've done it for a bunch of years now.
Cool. Well, Miss Catherine, tell us, what is an alpha reader? How do you guys work together? What is the process?
It's torture for him. That's what the process is, and it's torture for me. No. But
for one of us,
so and
it alternates back and forth.
So an alpha reader is different from a beta reader because beta readers are usually when you are mostly finished with the book. Maybe it's right before the proofreader or right after, but beta readers are reading the book once, you've given it to an editor. Alpha readers can be there from the very beginning of the book all the way up through. So in Ben's case, he got draft 1. So you know how people... Yes. You know how people are always like, no, draft 1, you never show it to anyone? Yeah, Ben saw draft 1. So yeah. So, and then he's also seen like, hey, I'm working this chapter.
And so, Ben, what do you think the hardest part of doing this for her is?
Ooh, I'll expand on that too, because you've done for 2 different books. So you pick whichever one you want to start with.
In the task as a whole, the most difficult part is as you make edits, as you've gone through some, especially on the second novel that we've worked on together, we've already done pretty much 3 full, pretty in-depth, extensive level rewrites. And then one you're reading, even when they're different and changed a lot, character-wise, timeline-wise, a lot of things, new plot points, you're reading some of the same content back to back, and then you get a little bit of an addition bleed. You start to, you're like, what, you get to the end of a book, you're 100 pages in, so you're like, was that something cut from the book? Is there a plot hole now? And you kind of have to, you get difficult to remember what's in this edition, what's been clipped out, what new things have been added. Sometimes even character names change, and you're trying to remember if maybe someone got deleted and their traits rolled together. Sometimes you just got to step back because you're like, I've read this book 3 times. It's familiar while also being different. That can be a chore.
I'm sorry. So that was mostly I think anyway, the space opera one. What about Scandal's Pen? Because I had only sent it to you, so I didn't get to see your feedback immediately like we normally do.
Yeah, so actually one thing we do in our alpha reading, The first book we worked on, you gave it to me. You had questions you wanted posed. I would kind of burn through the chapters, give you some feedback, see how things were, things that didn't work, where I was having a hang up. And I would give you some feedback. Once in a while, if it was an exciting chapter, you got messaged in the middle of the chapter with a little bit of excitement. But you do miss a little bit. We found when we did the second one, where I would read it live in a call with you. It let us do a lot more intense editing and work. You got a lot more personal and timely feedback on it. Because sometimes when you even just chapter by chapter, it's hard to put into words, or you gloss over the smaller things because you only remember the large ones at the end. You're like, that was a problem, this was a problem, and you miss all the very small parts where maybe a line was fantastic and even in an edit you want to keep it, or something was really confusing for a bit but it did sort out later, but you kind of muddle through it for a minute and go reread those points. When we did it live, we got a lot more intensity to it, a lot more depth to it. And it also let me get way more hands-on with you. It wasn't just feedback. I could come in, sit there, be like, this feels weird, this is clunky, the pacing's off, and we could workshop it together. So it definitely is a lot more intense, hands-on. You have to sync up schedules, but it definitely brought a lot more to the table as far as improving the work.
Yeah, because it definitely became more of also a soundboard. However, you got real good at just making faces while you were reading, just because you could.
It was a real excitement because sometimes she could tell it was clunky, but I'm pushing through just so I could get the gist of what's going to happen before I gave her the feedback on what needed to change. Other times, it was smooth. Great chapter. Fantastic. The ones that just flowed out of her, but then I would read through it without too much facial expression suddenly because I'm just absorbing it. And suddenly she'd be like, I'm worried. You could see the panic form because she wasn't sure what was happening. Was it terrible? Was it great? Why am I not reading? Can you move the cursor was a common refrain so I know where you are.
I would start writing notes to be like, did you get here yet,
Yeah.
Ben?
There'd be little notes I'd be reading and she'd jump ahead, wasn't sure where I would be, and suddenly there'd just be a hilarious one line or a little inside joke, suddenly a little comment, so that I'd react and she'd know where I was at. So we definitely had fun, and we brought up soundboard, which was something else too, because you might read a chapter, 10 minutes, give you some feedback, another 10, 15 minutes. But then issues we came to, I'd be like, you know what? We're 15 chapters in. I still don't know where the plot is going to be taking us. I feel I'm not hooked yet. Things like that. We could workshop. We would sometimes spend an hour, 2 hours after coming up with new plot points. Be like, you know what? We're really lacking a protagonist to take control, or an antagonist here just feels really lacking. And we would workshop things, sometimes chapters ahead. Sometimes we would have to go back and add things. So like there was definitely a lot there, at least in our relationship to it.
Yeah. Plus, you make sure that I don't plot anymore, which is great. Although VE is very annoyed at that because he is a plotter. And
so was she. I'll be 100% honest here. Catherine, big plotter. She sometimes pretends she's not, and then you'll see she's got binders full of plans ahead of time.
Well,
and I
that's world
quickly
building.
after by the time the space opera, the second book, I could tell exactly which chapters you plotted and which ones you didn't, because the ones you didn't plot, so much smoother, so much more organic. The ones you plotted felt like you were trying to stuff stuff into it, and it was disjointed and it was clunky, and the dialogue was broken and out of pace because you were trying to hit point to point without any connections, and I could pick them out instantly.
Yep. So see, you have now made me a complete pantser. I don't plot anything. It drives him insane.
I don't believe you don't plot anything. You still have a lot of plots there, but I think you do let the process kind of take you in the current a little bit more. And to my opinion, it's for the better. It definitely lets you, and it also lets you take new directions that you didn't quite it makes the characters feel more alive themselves. I've appreciated it in your writing style.
Thanks.
So what's the best part of this mess for you, Ben?
I think that'd be, to anyone who's listening to this kind of podcast, the same thing that the author gets out of it. Like there's, especially in the relationship that Catherine and I have formed, such a depth of what we work on together and to that process. I may not be the kind of person who can just out of thin air create a whole world like she does. But if I have a framework, I feel I'm fantastic at starting to fill that in, to bring it to life, to flesh it out. So you get that kind of same thrill of working on something. You get to see, in this case, a good friend whose vision is coming alive. The same as she would read my reactions. The amount of the jokes and laughter and communication and dialogue we've had, hours and hours across weeks and months on multiple novels, that it really brings, a depth to your relationship and to your friendship, and you get to see that creation.
If you had known then what you know now, would you have done it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's exciting. Even if you're not like the core author, it's the same as someone who might work on a movie. Maybe they're not the director or the title actor, but you still have that excitement for being part of that experience, part of that process, seeing part of that vision come to life. And there'll be lines in there that I know I gave her. There'll be plot points or ideas that I know I changed or took a different path because of an idea I had. And that's super exciting. It's the same excitement that the author or any artist doing any kind of creation gets to see and feel.
Except your version. Your version, I'm telling you, is going to get its own different ending. I hate you for it now.
there is a lot of excitement because sometimes the personal traits that I might appreciate, or the way I feel a character, that can be a real thing. Is I feel a character vibes or is described one way, maybe not by words, but by their actions and the tone and the personality they have, and it's not what she intended. Maybe she still doesn't realize that it's different, and suddenly you'd be like, this character feels like this, and you kind of describe how the vibe that character is giving off, and it doesn't match what she thought she was writing. And then it's like, well, am I reading that by my personal experience applied? Did she not write it the way she originally intended? We've had a lot of back and forth, a lot of interesting conversations, and sometimes you both disagree. And the author takes it one direction, and you're sitting there, and it just becomes a running inside joke between you because you're like, I still don't believe it.
Arlo is amazing.
So, Catherine, what kind of advice would you offer an author who's looking for an alpha?
Ooh, good question. So if you're looking for an alpha reader, you definitely want someone who likes to read. I got lucky. Like when I was in the process of doing it, I wasn't looking for an alpha reader. I was looking for betas because I was like, I finished the book. Don't you get people who read it? Like that's the next step. Editing is the next step. People edit your book, then give it to people to read. But so for if you're looking for someone who is going to read the rough drafts, they have to be aware that it's going to be the rough drafts. Like there's going to be spelling errors. Ben still laughs at my spelling errors. My computer now recognizes the Canadian spelling for several words because of his corrections. Definitely look for someone who's going to give you honest feedback, who is like going to enjoy the process of it. Don't look for someone who's just going to pat you on the back. Like, yeah, it's really cool when he sits there and he's like, I love this, but like, I want to hear, no, I really don't, but I want to hear this part sucked. Like, no, this isn't working. Please go fix this. They need to kiss.
You've heard many
they
of
need
those.
To cut 17 chapters.
That's a big thing. Unless you're finding someone in a circle who maybe isn't your friend, but as we've discussed, like the relationship we have for alpha level and the work we put in together isn't just basic feedback to what we've done. So it's obviously someone that you're going to need to have confidence and trust in, and maybe some kind of at least passable friendship there too. But they've also got to be someone who's not going to be a yes person, that is going to be able to hit you with, this is terrible, and I know this is from your heart, but it is awful. And then also just work on fixing that. Sometimes it means back to the drawing board. Sometimes a whole chapter needs to be deleted and parts of it that are good blended into another. Sometimes you get 200 pages in and you're like, this plot's going nowhere. I'm reading an encyclopedia. And that's a hard thing to task. We've thrived on the back and forth. But that, that's not going to be every person you encounter. So you may not find the same level of intensity or feedback or success with any person out there. And that's not a bad thing. They could still certainly help you at other phases. But not everyone's going to bring the same amount of aid to that process.
Yeah. And definitely know what you're going to be looking for in an alpha reader, because I was looking for someone who, could do story with me, who, yeah, you can get into the characters. I mean, like, I met Ben at a Roaring Twenties party, and then I knew that he went and dressed up as a knight and would battle people on the side. So I was like, yeah, he can get into character, no problem. Like, you can do you could do characters with me. So know what you're looking for when you go to talk with your alpha, because like, I know I'm better now if I do, hey, I wrote a chapter, here you go, I haven't even touched it again, let's go look it over. Versus when I gave him the whole manuscript, I still missed stuff. It was a fun conversation after, but I would have loved to have seen what you had thought of Scandal's pen per chapter. That would have been real interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting for us to look back on that one, because I got the whole book and it was the first one we did. And then now we look back at it after subsequent writing works we've worked together on. And, you always wonder what that one would have been like. Uh, by the time I entered that draft was actually, I felt much smoother, except for maybe like the first 6 chapters. And it was like, oh, this is going to be tough. That was the first time, and really the only time I was almost regretting it. I was like, ooh, okay, I gave my commitment to this task. It's a little clunky. I'm kind of forcing myself, because it's not like you picked up a book and suddenly you're like, ooh, this is exciting to me. It's like, here's a job. Here's a world. You don't know what it's like. Maybe you're not in the mood to be reading, and you're like, oh, I can't wait all month and then start reading. I got to give her some feedback now. And it was a bit rough. And then I got hooked, and you got that flow. And suddenly I was at work, and I'd be 12 chapters later being, what are you doing? Or how dare you do this to my character? So like it was polished, and I had that opportunity to get hooked. Whereas in later ones we did chapter by chapter. Definitely for those works though, was much more successful that way as well, because they were a lot rougher and needed more work, and it gave us chances to work together. And we hit a point, twice, we were on the third rewrite, where it was like, we need to go back. There's cumulatively enough changes that we need to go back, start it over, make some of these things, get them implemented, because going further isn't going to be helpful, because the whole plot line is probably going to evolve.
Yeah. We've still put that one to the side. I haven't got back to it for a while. We needed a break, both of us.
Yeah, but we've worked on a lot of projects, a lot of genres, a lot of characters, timelines, different types of period pieces. So our relationship for that has really evolved to where we have a mutual respect and appreciation for the other person, what they're delivering. And we know that we can hammer out details, and even if it's a character that I don't like, she loves. You don't like every character, but she feels it's necessary to a plot. Sometimes you hate the villain, but you obviously know they're necessary. So we have a lot of fun. And if you're going to put that much time and effort into a person, it's got to be someone that you're going to be able to get along with for that kind of time. You don't want just a coworker that you smile and nod for an hour a week and then you disappear. So for us, this has really worked out.
Well, good. Okay. What in your experience, or if you may not have any experience with this, when is it time to call it quits and end the relationship?
We haven't hit any kind of point of that. Hopefully, we don't. Like we glossed over a few points that might trigger something like that if you're in the market of searching for an alpha reader or you have a difficulty with it. We've hit all, we've already experienced points where we've just had to agree to disagree. Maybe I didn't think a direction was the best or a character was necessary, and but then I gave my feedback, I gave my appreciation, and you carry on. If that person, if your relationship dynamic doesn't allow for that, also my feedback, I'm hoping she's come back to me many times. She greatly appreciated it and is helpful. Sometimes the feedback just isn't there. The person might be really willing to help you, but they just either don't have experience in it, the vocabulary for it, the vision to try and create stuff that, it's not for everyone. Not everyone can just plop down and write out a world. Or imagine a character that isn't just, themselves or someone from their personal experience. So you might just find a person who just doesn't bring what you need. You're just going to get very basic, bland feedback that's not really going to be helpful to you. We haven't. Hopefully we don't. I think we've done enough now that we're probably pretty stable on that. But if you're in the market for an alpha reader, that'd be your biggest concerns, is someone who isn't going to respect when you disagree and is going to be willing to disagree and not just be like, I liked it.
Mm-hmm. And definitely, so when we did Scandal's Pen, I got to see the feedback separately so I could digest anything and then be like, okay, cool, I see where you're coming from. When we're doing the space opera, I'm getting it immediately, and sometimes you've got to really bite your tongue. So, like, those have been the moments, especially when it comes to one character in that series who I'm going to really make a side series about just because. Like, it's gotten to that point. But it really is about that
And well,
feedback.
if this is for, another author out there, yeah, so we got a bit of a lag there, but yeah, if you're like another author who's out there working with an alpha reader, how you receive that feedback and the level of involvement they have is going to be a very different place. Our first book, she got, bulk generalized feedback after a bunch of reading. And I just gave her my opinions on things. I didn't tell her how to change something. I didn't feel, I'd be like, this is the direction I'm feeling. It's probably flowing. And that might work for a person. Maybe they don't want someone else's hands in their puzzle or their vision for it. But you also had time to digest what I said. If I was disagreeing with something, unhappy with something, you had time to think about it. Just wonder why. Maybe it was because it was supposed to be a point where the reader was lost, and then the mystery got solved later. Whereas when we were doing it live, it was great for the process, especially if you're in an earlier phase of the book, and you haven't had a bunch of it already written or even completed potentially. But you get knee-jerk reactions. You get those instant reactions where even sometimes I'll be like, no, okay, I see what you're doing there. And it can be fun, but it can also be anxious and anxiety inducing.
Yeah, so if you're not ready to get that feedback, or you are someone who needs that time, work your way up to what Ben and I have done, because we did work our way up to it. I used to give him chapters at a time. Maybe I'd sit and watch occasionally, to me pestering him sometimes to be like, yo, read my chapter with me. Like, so definitely know what style you're ready for. And if you're not ready for that, I'm getting the immediate feedback. Talk that out with your reader, because you can work up to that.
All right. And what did we miss about this process? What did we not discuss that you think is important or that comes to mind?
some of these questions we already put on a tangent, so a lot of that stuff's probably buried in there somewhere. Um, Hopefully, anyone watching or listening to this will see the kind of dynamic that we've taken into the work we've done together, where it really feeds back and forth off each other. That's how we've ended up. Sometimes 20 minutes of work was on that core chapter she might have just written and wanted some immediate feedback on, and 2 hours later we're 20 chapters away in a plot line that's probably going to trigger another rewrite as we've gone down a complete tangent. uh, and the same thing happens. Yeah, I don't know necessarily off the top of my head what we may have missed, but it's probably buried half of it in there somewhere, alluded to.
I got lucky when it came to finding Ben. We clicked pretty well. Sometimes it might take somebody a little bit, or maybe it's definitely looking into the betas. If you've been getting beta readers and you have one that you've really been able to talk to, get good feedback from, you could then ask them on the next book, hey, do you want to be an alpha? So that means that you're in on the beginning process, not just seeing the end. So, I mean, I got lucky with my Ben. You guys need to go find yourselves a Ben.
Appreciate it. But that is a good source as well. Like if you have a beta who is going really above and beyond the content and feedback they're giving you, not just feedback on what's there, but maybe starting to add, this would be a good direction suggestions, or things like that, where they're really starting to give suggestions out. That would probably be a great person to bring on board and trial as an alpha. Because the big difference between the two is, the first book, I was more just the beta reader. The book was essentially start, middle, end. It was there. It was formatted. Things might need to adjust, but the plot was really already hammered out. The characters were hammered out. Other when we, space opera and other subsequent things we've worked on was not the case. We were in much earlier. Characters were still being workshopped, even as things wrote, like as we were adding traits to the characters, as plots revealed new things about them. And, we also just have different points. I, for one, am terrible at picking out all of the little foreshadowing she'll put in.
Oh
I'll
my
hit an
God,
end
you're
of a
so bad
chapter.
at
She'll
it.
be like, did you get the 10 foreshadowing points? Every other beta reader got them. No, I got none of them. But I also, just from feel and, my own personal experiences, figured out the giant plot twist that she had for the entire third act, in the
So
first act.
annoying.
And she'd be like, how did you figure that? I haven't even started foreshadowing that one. And then you missed all the obvious things. So different people are going to bring different levels. And that, is where we've done really good work, just you and I, but you also don't want to isolate yourself to just one person. And depending on who they are, you're going to get a lot of different feedback. That's a really exciting thing for me, because you never know. I will be very intense and opinionated about changes or directions and work that needs to be workshopped, but you never know if that's just my standpoint. Maybe I'm that one person who doesn't like a character that everyone else loves. Um, but then sometimes she'll come back and be like, I fed this off to 3 or 4 other people, and everyone's in agreement. Or everyone is just being like really worried to tell me that something was bad, but they felt they had to do it. And then they tell you something that's they think is going to hurt you. And you're just like, yeah, Ben's been saying the same thing already. I just wanted a second opinion first. I
Yeah.
was already briefed on this.
Uh-huh.
So I guess he was right, So it's exciting when as part of just as a creation, like a person working on creating something, it is really nice to have that bit of confirmation. You're able to put yourself outside your own mind, outside your own experiences, and just try and see things more from the character, from the world, from, you know, the diverse audience you're hoping to attract to that piece.
So you were right, Ben. Unlike 2 parts for Scandal's Pen. The third one, you're not right. And we will still fight over that piece all day.
And that's one of those agree to disagrees where I'm going to just pencil it into my copy at the end. That's the evolution of fan fiction right there.
I know.
Well, Catherine knows what I think Scandal's Pen needs, so, you know. And without giving any spoilers, yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to give any spoilers about
Probably
that.
the same thing. The special edition can sell more than the original.
There you go. Okay. Well, I guess that basically wraps it up. I really appreciate, Ben, you coming on. And we will see everybody next time.
Stay magical.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. That was fantastic. Everyone have a great night.